Here is how it started, and I still feel that little kick in my chest when I think about it. My power bill didn't creep up, it pole vaulted $200 out of nowhere, and the little charging light in my driveway blinked at midnight, like a wink I didn't appreciate. I'm the boring spreadsheet guy at work, the one who gets itchy when numbers don't line up. So I checked the meter at night, wrote down the readings, waited, and sure enough, the pattern was there. Power draining while my wife was asleep, my kid was out cold, and my own hybrid was unplugged. I set a cheap motion cam just to prove I was being paranoid, and yeah, that happened. The video played back like a heist scene, and it was my neighbor, not a stranger, not a prank, but the HOA treasurer herself, Marjorie Pike, in a cardigan, cool as a librarian, plugging her Tesla into my charger like she was borrowing a stick of butter. Cedar Glen looks like a commercial for lawn fertilizer. Tidy hedges, porches that smell like coffee, the whole bit. And in a place like that, you're supposed to smile, wave, and keep your head down. Ray, my wife, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Be smart. Talk first. Don't make it a war." I tried to listen. I really did. But the knot in my stomach kept tightening every time I saw that blinking light or thought about the bill. I printed stills from the camera, slid them into a folder, like evidence, walked across the cul-de-sac, and knocked. She opened the door with the kind of smile that says, "I already run this room." Caleb Ortiz. What a surprise. I held up the prints, told her I'd been hit hard on our power usage and why, and she didn't even blink, just handed the photos back and said, "You're being dramatic. We're a community. We share resources. Your charger sits idle most nights." I laughed a little too sharp and told her there's a difference between asking and stealing. That's when she tilted her head and said, "Do you even have HOA approval for that setup, Caleb? If we're going to nitpick, we can nitpick safety first." That wasn't a warning. It was a knife wrapped in a napkin. I told her don't plug into my house again. She gave me that tiny smirk people wear when they think the ending is already written, and said, "We'll see. You ever spend a night not sleeping but not exactly awake, just listening to the house breathe?" That was me watching the live feed, waiting for the little motion icon to flicker. Next morning, coffee still too hot. I scrubbed through the footage, and there she was at 1:17 a.m., calm, methodical, like it was her nightly yoga. By afternoon, she was on the curb with two neighbors waving HOA flyers and talking about safety hazards for outdoor fixtures. She looked at me like I was a raccoon getting into the trash. And when I told her loud enough for both sides of the street that I had her on camera, she didn't flinch, just leaned in and said quietly, "Be careful with accusations. Rules apply to everyone." That evening, I got an envelope listing overgrown hedges by 2 inches visible trash bins and a decorative turtle my daughter loved that apparently violated aesthetic harmony. You know what I mean. Death by paper cuts. Ray said this is going to get ugly if you let it. I knew she was right. But I also knew if I ignored it, it would get uglier. "I'll spare you the tech. I'm not here to teach anybody how to play electrician. Don't do that. But I set a boundary on my side of the property line, a protective cutoff, so anything that wasn't my car wouldn't draw power. Think seatbelt, not trap." Ray stood in the garage doorway, arms crossed, asking if I was sure, and I told her I was sure of why, which is what mattered. That night, I sat with the laptop open, live feed, humming room. Dark heartbeat loud in my ears. And at 12:58, she crossed the street, cardigan key fob. That same unbothered pace cable and charger blinked green, then click. Dead, her head snapped up. She unplugged and plugged again, like force could make electricity behave a tiny flicker. Then the car went quiet as a shut eyelid. For the first time, she looked small, not cruel, not powerful, just small. And she yanked the cord like it bit her and marched home. My hands shook not from fear, but from the kind of adrenaline that leaves you lightheaded and heavy all at once. Morning brought a tow truck. The whole block watched from behind curtains and coffee mugs. And by afternoon, a new letter landed in my mailbox. Emergency HOA review. Dangerous unapproved equipment endangering the community. Lena, my teenager, poked her head in and said kids at the bus stop were saying I set a trap, and I told her the truth. I protected our house, but I also know how stories travel, especially when the person with the gavel is the one telling them. The meeting was in that beige community room where birthday balloons go to retire folding chairs, stainless coffee urn, polite buzzing, until Marjorie started speaking in capital letters about order and safety. Then half the room nodded like they were in church. I stood with my folder and said I wasn't here about gnomes. I was here about theft. Held up time-stamped stills, laid them on the table, and watched the room inhale. For once, her mask slipped just a hair, and she said she was investigating a hazard, and I said at 1:30 a.m., "With your car?" Really? And the line I will never regret saying out loud came out of me before I could overthink it. Rules aren't leadership when you only use them as weapons. That cracked the room open. Some clapped, some stared, like I'd keyed their SUVs. The board punted any vote to the next meeting, which we all know is HOA, for we don't have a script for this. Here's the twist I didn't see coming. People started talking not in whispers, but out loud on purpose. Mr. Cho came by while I trimmed the famously offensive hedge and told me about the basketball hoop he paid a fine for because it disrupted the sightline. Mrs. Patel sent Ray a photo of the letter about the flag her father hung for a holiday I still can't pronounce right. Arthur, a retired teacher across the street, told me about a warmth standard his porch light allegedly failed. And then the neighborhood thread, usually Cat's yard sales lost keys, turned into a parade of scanned fines and tight, polite anger. By the second meeting, the fold-out chairs were full, not with people hoping to avoid eye contact, but with people holding folders like shields. The Johnsons stood with their shutters a shade of blue that made them happy, and a fine that did not. A mom read a citation about her son's skateboard and property values. A skateboard, for crying out loud. Her voice shaking, and the board president kept tapping a pen like he could will the thunder back into clouds. When my turn came, didn't play hero. I just said the line that had been sitting in my chest since the first bill hit. I'm not special. I'm just the guy who finally said the quiet part out loud. And this isn't about a power outlet. It's about whether the rules serve people or people serve the rules. Arthur stood next, looked the board in the eye, and said, "We trusted you with our money and our peace, and it feels like you handled neither. I move that we remove Ms. Pike as treasurer and create a committee to review fines." There was a beat where you could feel her searching the room for loyal faces, fewer than last week, and then the vote was unanimous. She stood, gathered her bag, and said we'd enjoy the weeds, and someone near the back muttered, "We'll risk the weeds," and that was that. I'd love to tell you it all turned to sunshine, but life isn't a commercial. I sat in the car with Ray after under dim lot lights and felt the anger cool into something like relief. Then relief settle into something like pride, not chest thumping, just a quiet des. The next morning I plugged in my car and watched the green light blink steady. It sounded like hours, like enough. Lena filmed our dog trying to catch a pancake. Mr. Cho waved Mrs. Patel. brought samosas that made me question every spice I thought I knew. And still, when I take the trash out, Marjorie clips her roses across the street with more force than roses deserve. Our eyes meet. No words, just the ache you get after holding a heavy box too long. A lawyer letter floated through the board a week later. Threats noise. Our attorney replied with the footage and the simple truth that property lines aren't poetry. Maybe these stories don't end. Maybe they just get quieter until they look like daily life again. So tell me where you land. What counts as neighborly and what counts as theft? When is setting a boundary? The right kind of loud. And when does keeping the peace just mean protecting the person who keeps crossing the line? Was I right, reckless, somewhere in between? You know what I mean. Drop your take in the comments. Argue it out. Tell me the wildest thing your HOA or building ever fined you for, and if this hit a nerve or made you think, tap subscribe and share it with the friend who always has a neighbor story. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, watch your meter, trust your gut, and remember, silence usually protects the wrong people.